The scenes that prompted the security cluster to ring the siren, warning that a blatant disregard for our law threatens national security and the sovereignty of our nation. We speak to Deputy Minister of Intelligence, Zizikotwa, but first, the Communist Party celebrated its 98th anniversary this past weekend and warned of attempts to remove President Cyril Ramaphosa. Good evening, I'm Aldrin Sampear and welcome to the PolitBureau. With the geopolitical shift towards nationalism and the re-emergence of the right-wing politics, where does the communists fit in? The South African Communist Party, at its 98th anniversary, recommitted itself to forging a popular left front. How possible is this when the vanguard of the working class watches thousands of people losing their jobs, while at the same time the leader of the alliance battles, quote, the enemy within? The SACP's first Deputy Secretary General, Solly Mapaila, joins us in studio. Good evening and welcome to PolitBureau. 98 years.
Yeah, of course, 98.
What does this mean?
98 militant years of working class struggles for national liberation and for socialism, to affirm the independence of the working class and the fact that the working class must ultimately wrestle political power and control it for its own interests rather than allow the bourgeoisie, the rich, to so decide, which they've shown that they're incapable to be responsible for everybody.
Well, why do you think over the past 90 years communism, or whether we say socialism, hasn't resonated that much with even South Africans or even people around the globe?
There's no capitalist system that has liberated the world. On the contrary, it was a socialist perspective. I think only in the American independence you can link that. But overall, it's largely the socialist movements that have come together to liberate the world at large. And I think that socialism still remains relevant today for as long as there's abject poverty and the huge gap between the rich and the poor. We require socialism.
But why doesn't it resonate in the sense that a socialist party would be elected to govern the country or a country?
It's not much a question of resonance. It's a question of the domination and the brutality of the capitalist system that has, for instance, overpowered society with its ideas, particularly through advertisement. That is why if you move around this country, you'll hardly find a revolutionary slogan, a slogan about humanism. Instead, you'll find consumerism, which is actually an expression of the capitalist system. And in our case, we even have the worst form of capitalism, the free market economic capitalist system. So that's part of the reason. But obviously, that system creates extreme levels of poverty, and there will be a surely reaction by the people. That is why, at the moment, the socialist movement is growing worldwide, and we are.
Is it really when you see like the right wing movements emerging, or the re-emergence of right wing politics?
Yes, of course, the brutality of capitalism breeds both right-wing nationalism as well as ultra-left-wing nationalism, populism, demagogy, and so forth. So all those things will be characterized by the extreme reaction to the capitalist system. That is why the Communist Party has responded principally to the system, to critique the system, while recognizing, for instance, the inclusivity of what socialism is about. Hence, we have always affirmed in the midst of this capitalist crisis the necessity for an unracial South Africa, for a united South Africa, for a prosperous South Africa that feeds everybody irrespective of their economic situation. Hence, we pioneered some of the most important programs. The National Health Insurance, for instance, was pioneered by us, and many other such kind of interventions, including on the housing section. So socialist ideas remains much more relevant today.
Let's quickly speak about the former leader of the SACP, Chris Hani. Quite recently, actually, former President Jacob Zuma, speaking outside the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, left the impression that they know who killed him.
Well, we'd like to know that, but our understanding was that he was referring to an assassination in Lesotho.
Yeah.
That was a specific incident, not much about his death. Of course, we would have definitely would have long demanded that he give us the full...
Why do you think there are no full answers with regards to the death of Chris Hani?
Well, of course, the Janus Walus, who's still in prison, doesn't want to tell the truth. Clive W. Lewis, when he died, he refused to tell the truth, and on his sickbed, he made a video to the extent of how he hates socialism or communist, and how, for instance, he will repeat the same deed. So to that extent, I think the judicial system has let us down in this case, particularly the criminal justice system, which failed to do an intensive investigation to apprehend or to follow up all the leads. That's why at some point the SACP, through particularly started by our Young Communist League, had called for an inquest on the death of Comrade Chris, because we think that as part of the response
led by who?
What do you mean?
The inquiry.
Of course, the inquest should be established by government, should be a judicial inquest, which will be able to subpoena people to give evidence for as long as there are pointers to their direction. But we must indicate that the loss of Comrade Chris was quite huge for the Communist Party, not only in South Africa, on the African continent and internationally. Was a very popular and very influential leader worldwide. I remember, for instance, one of his last visits to Cuba, he had almost a 6-hour meeting with Comrade Fidel. And quite clearly, it was the exchange of great minds, of ideas about what the world is about and what should happen.
Okay.
But to that extent, I think it's important to make this point that we still want the truth about the death of Comrade Chris as a Communist Party, and that's why we don't want Janus Walus to ever be released from prison without telling the truth.
The General Secretary of the party is saying this past weekend that the alliance and the ANC is in distress, but also going as far as warning that there are those who are trying to displace the president of the ANC. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yes, we have spoken about what we call the Fight Back campaign, and I think it's quite clear. It doesn't need a rocket scientist to see it. It's rejecting the interventions, particularly led by Comrade President Ramaphosa, with regard to cleaning up government in order to make sure that we have a government that is responsive to the people. We fight against corruption in government, and that is why even some of the leaders who have led his call through ministerial appointments like Pravin Gordhan have been targeted specifically because they've been zooming in specifically and directly to the question of corruption, including other state-owned enterprises, for instance, Comrade Popo Mlefe, who is leading a massive campaign and effort to clean up Transnet, is also been targeted. So it is quite clear that the fight back is both for those networks, corrupt networks, as well as in the political sphere. But we can also see it from...
Is the intention of the fight back to remove the president?
Of course, I think there's quite clear that there are those intentions, but in the main is to disable him to be able to continue with the campaign to clean up government.
But who's leading that?
We have indicated that it's a wide range of forces. It doesn't need us to...
Give us names.
For you. No. I mean, we have had Juanita, for instance, from the Sunday Times, I think. She had reported about a meeting in Durban. And if you look what's happening and what was decided in that particular meeting, there's correlation. There's no doubt about it. But it's beyond that. But what
is the Secretary General of the party involved there?
We have characterized that ourselves.
Is the Secretary General of the ANC involved there?
Can I finish my point?
Okay.
Yeah. We have characterized that as counter-revolution. That's how serious we take this matter. And we'll be raising it with the alliance. We've actually asked for a bilateral meeting as well as an Alliance Political Council where we'll put this matter properly on the table for discussion. Is
the Secretary General of the ANC involved in that fight-back campaign?
No, let me not comment on that because we are venturing into names. So it's not about names per se.
But you're the one who went to the Maharaj Hotel. You're the one who went to the Maharaj Hotel. So now I'm asking you. Maharani, sorry.
It's journalists from the Sunday Times who brought it to the table. Has that issue been denied? That's your job as a journalist to make a follow-up. But from our side, insofar as the party is concerned, we'll put this matter on the table for consideration by the alliance because we feel that counter-revolution has been brewed from inside the movement.
Okay, quick one. Busisiwe Mkhwebane, the public protector, you've accused the former public protector of being a counter-revolutionary during the time of the Nkandla investigation.
No.
What? Yes, you have?
Not the Communist Party.
Yes, the Communist Party has accused the Thuli Madonsela of being a counter-revolutionary. No. Yes, and she even issued a statement to that effect and said that you were attacking her.
No,
back in 2014.
We differed with her. We never said she's counter-revolutionary.
Yeah.
Maybe the statement that I remember to that effect was by Comrade Kebi Mapat, not the SACP.
Okay, so she's not a counter-revolutionary?
We never said
the former
she is.
public protector?
No, we never said
so
she is.
what was she responding to when she said that she is amazed that the SACP would call her a counter-revolutionary?
Thuli Madonsela?
Yes.
Well, I don't know about that, but what I do know is that we did have some differences with, like we did have with this one, but the differences were not the same. They differ on the veracity of issues. For instance, we have said, and we have also raised the same point with this current, the incumbent, that the Office of the Public Protector, in the main, it's about the protection of ordinary citizens who can afford legal fees, but who, for instance, are not happy with government services. That was the latent spirit of the Constitution in crafting this. But we have seen now the office being utilized by political parties, even rich people who can afford legal fees and everything else, to abuse that office to fight for political battles. And that's what we have wondered about. In fact, if you do, which is what part of the journalists that they can do, a proper investigation as to the number of cases that affect the ordinary people, which is what the office is about, and the number of high-level, so-called high-level cases that attract particularly media attention, you'll find that the majority of the people are not being served proper, and that's what we want to rectify as well.
I think that she will dispute that, but thank you so much. SACP's First Deputy General Secretary. When we return, suspected foreign nationals' attack on the police is a blatant disregard for our law, and did it threaten national security and the sovereignty of our nation?